Property investors often talk about having a great power team around them. That's experts such as solicitors, accountants, mentors, architects, people such as these that are really going to help and guide you through the process. However, very few talk about the importance of the right builder as part of the team, because a builder, by picking the wrong one, can mean catastrophic outcome on your project. In this video, I'm going to share with you 3 key steps in finding the right builder and hiring them for your project. If you're watching my videos for the first time, my name is Saj Hussain, and on this channel I share with you my 15 years of property investing experience to ultimately help you get further faster in your own property investing journey. When it comes to hiring a builder, something that's really important is having a clear outcome of what it is you want to try and get them to achieve for you. Now, we might have a little sense of what we want this finished thing to look like, but really you need much more clarity than that. You need clear details of exactly what you want someone to create. But let's face it, what does a builder do? They build, they create things for you, but you need to have some guidance for them in terms of what it is that you need to do for them. So it's not only thinking about how am I going to hire a good builder, it's thinking about how are you going to be a good customer. Are you going to be organized? You can be clear in terms of what you want, and that means that the builder can get on and do their job for you and produce the outcome you want. Often the reason things go wrong because there's a breakdown in terms of understanding of what's required, what needs to happen by when. These are the things that cause problems on building projects. So that takes me straight into step number 1, which is having a clear plan of what it is that you want the builder to do. Before I got involved in property, my background was in IT, and there we have a concept called garbage in, garbage out. Essentially what that means, if you feed your computer with garbage information, you can't expect good quality data to come out the other end. In the same way, when you're trying to work with a builder and you're trying to plan out what it is you want to do, if you're giving them very little information, then really they don't have very much to go on. So for example, if you're saying, well, what I want the builder to do is come and convert this house into a 6-person HMO for me, well, that's a little bit vague. There's a lot of interpretation that possibly can be derived from that in terms of what you want, how you want it, what you want that to look like. And really it's open to a lot of guesswork by the builder. And if you're trying to get quotes that you're going to try and compare, it's very difficult to do that because you are not really comparing like for like. The reason for that is because you haven't necessarily provided enough detailed information. Before you can get into the nitty-gritty detail of what you want, you need to really think about who it is that you're creating this product for, whose home is it going to be, who's going to live in there, and what kind of finish you want. So for example, if you're taking a house that you're converting for a basic buy-to-let, for example, might be for social housing, versus a house that's going to be an executive home that you're going to flip on and sell, the kind of finishes that you want and the specifications are going to be very, very different. But sometimes people just refer to things, I just want a good quality job. Well, quality comes through many different forms. So the quality will be some of it in the good planning and design earlier on. Some of the quality comes from being able to use good quality materials, and some of the quality is actually by the workmanship, which is often what things are assessed on, what something looks like, but not taking into consideration how well something's been planned out and thought through, and also the type of materials that are being used. Now, something that's really interesting when it comes to price, which is the reason that many people make a decision on which person to use as a builder. Often we'll just go for the cheapest one. Things about prices, it's important to understand that price really works in a way that doesn't really serve us necessarily in the best way. For example, when we're thinking about price, we need to think about a couple of other factors as well, which is the quality and the speed, and they all work together. So for instance, if you're looking for something that's going to be a quick job, it's unlikely it's going to be a good quality job. Or if you're looking for something that's going to be cheap, it's unlikely it's going to be a good job. So these are the things that we need to take into consideration when we're looking at price, because price doesn't work in isolation. Once you've determined who the product is going to be for, so you've got an idea of what you want it to look like as a finished product, then you need to really think about how much is it that you want to allocate towards getting this job done, i.e. the budget. Now, this really depends on also your experience in terms of how experienced you are in trying to determine what's the right figure. Sometimes people make the mistake of getting the builders round to say, right, post it up, what do you think it's going to be? Well, you really need to start with a plan first or an idea what you think it's going to be before you get the builder in to come and quote it for you. But if you've got experience, that's all well and good because you've got an idea how something will be, however, or in terms of how much it's going to cost. However, if you're doing this, say, for the first time or the second time, you haven't necessarily got the experience to be able to cost up what a project's going to be. This is where having the right people around you is going to help, whether that's your architect supporting you, other property investors, your mentor that's helping you, whoever is helping you or guiding you through that, you need to bounce some ideas and thoughts off them. So for example, in that inner circle program, our mentoring group, one of the things we talk about quite often is the costs of getting jobs done. How much is it going to cost to get this roof changed? What sort of figure are we looking at to be able to rewire the extension and put an ensuite in there? So we get an idea and a sense from people that are already doing these kind of things around us to be able to get a gauge for where the sense checking what we think the numbers are going to be. That way you can put together a figure of what you think the overall cost is going to be on the project. Now remember, this is your estimate at this stage as opposed to exactly what it's going to cost. And if you're doing something very early, in the sense that you're doing these planning before you've got the keys on a property, then you'll need to have worked out on your numbers, on your initial appraisal anyway, how much is it that you're estimating for the works. At this stage, what you're doing is getting into a little bit more detail. Make sure that you've sense checked your numbers and it looks realistic in terms of how much you're allocating for the work. The information you use for your budgeting will also then form what you create as a list of work that you're going to hand the builder for them to follow off and be able to work out a cost for you in terms of how much this project is going to cost. Once you've got the budget worked out, you'll have already had a list of works that you need to do, which is now going to form the next stage of the document that you're going to be giving to your builder for them to cost out this job for you. Because remember, if we just say to them, yes, what we want is this house converted to 6-bedroom HMO, give us a figure, mate, then really we're not going to be able to get anything that's meaningful and useful for us, that's going to help us in any way. What we need to do is break it down exactly what it's going to be. And that's some of this work you've already done when you do your budgeting to work out roughly what things are going to cost. But really you need to be able to provide more detail so that the clarity is there for the builder quoting it, so there's no misunderstanding or minimum open to things that are open to misunderstanding, as it were, when they're looking at the job. So sometimes people will call this a specification of works, a schedule of works, or a scope of works. Really, it doesn't really matter what it's called. Essentially, the thing is, it's a document that lists out everything that you want them to do. Now, this doesn't need to be any technical language. In fact, I would encourage you to just do it in simple English, just make it really clear and easy to understand, and not nothing that's too comprehensive in terms of technical language, because again, this can be open to misunderstanding as well, even if you are using technical language, because you don't know who else is using this document and how they're interpreting it. So keeping it really simple just means that you're going to minimize the chances of somebody misunderstanding that information. When we put together a schedule of works for our projects, the way we tend to approach it is generally we look at the house and we look at what is it that we need to do pretty much in the whole house. For example, we need to redecorate the whole house, we need to recarpet the whole property. It may be that the whole property is going to be rewired, a central heating system is going to go in. These things apply to the overall whole building, and pretty much throughout all the rooms, these things are going to be done. So we're going to have radiators pretty much everywhere. Then what we would do, once we've got that level of detail done, the next thing we would do is break it down as a room by room. So that means we literally walk around with a clipboard and a list and say, right, okay, so what is it we want to do in the hallway? What do we want to do in the first room? What is it we need to do in the second room? And okay, so here, what we want to do, we want a socket there, we want an electrical socket there, we want a dimmer switch here. Pretty much down to that level of detail, we're planning out exactly what we want to see happen. Now, some people get frustrated by having to spend so much time here and they really skip this process, but those are the projects I feel increase the chance of them going wrong. By spending the time here, just planning out and mapping out exactly what's required, by putting together the list in this way, means that the next stage will be so much easier for you to be able to compare the quotes. The next step in this process, step number 2, is actually finding the builder to quote for the job. Now, the actual finding of the builder is something many people struggle with because they think this is the challenge in itself. But if you watch this video all the way to the end, you'll see that this actually isn't the difficult part. This is probably the most easiest part in this process. Because when it comes to looking for builders, my preferred method is generally go to referrals. That means asking other people who they've already done some work for as a starting point, because it means there's always some kind of introduction there rather than just going out somebody blind. Now, if it is a case of friends and family you've asked and they haven't necessarily got anybody that they can refer you to, or you maybe found one or two and you're looking for more, then business network meetings or property network meetings is another favorite place of mine to be able to find these builders. Now, often, if, for example, the business network meeting, you might find somebody, say one of these breakfast meetings that do referrals, where you might have, say, a builder that's there and attends a meeting regularly. And with the property network meetings, generally we find not many builders attend these type of events because they're less interested in going out and investing and building their own property businesses, which is essentially what many of the property networking meetings will all be about. It will be about helping you on your own property investing journey. So there's fewer builders that attend these type of meetings. However, there'll be a lot of property investors there that will be using builders, that know builders that you might be able to get a referral from. Now, a quick caveat. One of the things that I'm very open with is sharing contacts, connections to be able to help other people. One of the things very tight with is sharing builders. That's because when we get a good one, we want to hang on to them, and it's a case of keep them in work and give them plenty to do. And we of course want them to be available when we've got stuff that we want them to do, as opposed to them now not being available because they've got 6 other jobs that they've taken on. So although networking is a great place to look for builders, you might find that the property investors may not be so forthcoming with their building contacts, because it's something many people struggle with, and hence why I'm doing this video, really to help you with your own property investing journey and be able to find the right people. So let's say you've gone to friends and family, you've gone to networking events, you had a look there and that's given you some, but you're still looking for more. Of course, the other thing you can do is look in your area yourself that you're looking to do some work in, and look for other builders that might be working that area. You know, builders are very good when they start the job, put their board outside, XYZ builders working here, Bob the builder working over here. And so you can just go along and just introduce yourself and look for the person who's the builder that's in charge and have a chat with them about what they're doing or whether they'd be interested in taking on any more projects or quoting for any more projects right now. So there's another place that you can actually find somebody that might be able to help you as a potential builder. The next source of being able to find a good builder is be able to use the on-site portals such as mybuilder.com, Check a Trade. These are new websites that have come about over the last few years where somebody can go on and find somebody suitable. You'll be able to see reviews for work that they've done. You know, they might vary in quality in terms of what they like and what you'll find, but it's definitely a source of being able to find a contact. It's not something I've personally done, but I know other people that have managed to find some good people through these type of platforms. And of course, there's also some accreditations, although there's not really a huge amount when it comes to building trade. You also have the Guild of Master Craftsmen and the Federation of Master Builders. These are accreditation bodies that that builders can subscribe to and be a member of, and of course it means that there's some kind of accreditation level there as well. But that doesn't necessarily guarantee success, or just because somebody's a member of a certain body or they're on a certain website with some great reviews, it doesn't mean that that's all you need to do and they're going to be successful in doing your job for you. Now, something that I learned from a friend of mine who's done, and personally I haven't done, but I think it's a great strategy, he'd go nice and early to the merchants, the suppliers of the materials of, you know, your timber, plumbing, etc., where the builders and tradespeople will go nice and early in the morning to be able to get their supplies for the day. And he will sit outside and look at the vans that come along and see who he thinks might be interesting, worth having a conversation with, and really just talking to people there, because that's a central hub, if you like, for tradespeople and builders to come together and get the materials that they need. And it means you can pick up some local contacts that way as well. So let's assume you've now found your builder using one of the methods we were talking about. The next step is actually getting a quote from them. So my suggestion is to get more than 3 quotes. And the reason I say more than 3 quotes is because we want to end up with at least 3 quotes so we can compare. And the reason we need to ask for more than 3 quotes is because, as we'll discover, some of these are not actually going to come through, or they might be way off what we thought they were going to be. They've not really understood the specification, or they haven't really delivered on just the very first hurdle of actually being able to provide a quote for us. So if we're looking for more than 3 quotes, it means that hopefully we'll end up with at least 3 quotes that we can then compare. One of the first things we would look for in a new builder that we're looking to work with is just to understand, have they done the kind of work that we're looking for? So for example, going back to the 6-person HMO conversion that we're looking at, where we're taking a family house and turning it into a HMO, we really want to see, has the builder done this kind of project before? And if they haven't, have they got enough technical knowledge of something similar? For example, have they done small flat conversions where they understand the overall concept of what's required to be able to do something similar? So for example, if they've only ever done kitchen extensions and loft conversions in family houses, then they might not necessarily be best suited to do a HMO conversion for us. So we're looking for experience of that particular type of project that we're looking to find a builder for, so that they're bringing the relevant experience. And this will eliminate some of the people that we're already speaking to, because it means they won't necessarily have the experience that we're looking for. Whether it's a phone call or an email introduction, or maybe even meeting them at a project that they're doing, one of the things I want to do is actually meet them at a project that they're currently doing, because there's a number of things I'm looking for. One of the first things I'm looking for is how the site is laid out, are they quite organized? Does it look like a complete mess? Does it look like a bomb's just gone off and the whole thing's just a disaster? Or does it look like it's very well organized, very well run, people are getting on what they need to do, things are tidy, organized, it's nice and safe as well, there's not a lot of danger, trip hazards all over the place as well. So what you're looking for is a nice, tidy, clean, well organized and well run site. Now, if they're not expecting you, hopefully they'll just be working as normal, so you can see what their normal working environment is. And for me, that is key, just to understand how it is that they work. The other thing I'm looking for is when I'm speaking to the builder is really just building some rapport with them and just to understand what kind of person they are, what kind of personality they are, because I've potentially given them a very large job to do and we might be working together for several months. And it's like taking on a team member. You want to know that they're going to be a good fit for your culture, your environment, the way you work, that they're going to fit into working in that particular way. And just speaking to them, just chatting to them about their family, non-work stuff, you understand some of their values, some of the principles that's important to them, or whether they've even got any principles or morals, because let's say, face it, some people lack some of those. And you want to try and sense this. It doesn't mean this is going to be an interview that you're going to tick off or cross off somebody necessarily just on that, but you start building a little bit more of an understanding about the kind of person who's potentially going to be a key team member for you in delivering this project. During this process, I'm also learning about their business in terms of how long they've been running, what size business they are, whether they use subcontractors, whether they've got direct employees. Now with subcontractors and direct employees, neither is right or wrong. It's not mean a case of if somebody only has subcontractors, we're not going to work with them. There's lots of people I work with in the now and in the past as well, which really is a one-person team and they just subcontract all the work out. And that's fine as long as we get the result we're looking for, as long as it kind of fits in with the overall outcome we're trying to achieve. So it's not a case of one is right or one is wrong. We want to understand how much work they've got on, sort of, how many jobs they might run at any one moment in time, who the key people are in their team. Is it a one-man person that's going to be running around quoting all the jobs? In the evening, they're going to be doing all the admin. In the morning, they're going to be early there, getting all the materials in, and they're relying on, three key people. And, one of them, their missus has just gone into labour, having a baby, and they've been off for a couple of days, and they haven't been able to get hold of Bob, who's the gas engineer, because, he's isolating at the moment. Are they going to struggle with managing people? Have they got a good team? Does it seem they're quite organised? Doesn't matter whether they're directly employed or they're subcontractors. It's really about how they work as a team and how organised they might be. In my experience, a lot of small building firms tend to be a tradesperson that's expanded out and grown a little bit of a team. So for example, there might be a carpenter by trade themselves, and what they do is they take on a few other people to help them take on bigger jobs and be able to deliver bigger projects. Because there's some tradespeople that are literally like a 9-to-5 type of job where they'll just go work for somebody else and then the day they finish, they're not really interested in doing any more than that. And then you've got the overall contractor, if you like. They're the one that's looking to take this work on. The builder we're looking to work with, he may be somebody who's also a tradesperson himself as well and also working on the job. Now, of course, this depends on the size of your project. For example, when we're looking at new build houses, for instance, we're probably looking at bigger teams, at bigger companies, but the process is different as well. Assuming you're doing a small renovation, extension, light refurb, or even a big refurb in one house, this process is the one that we follow and I think it works really well. Sometimes other investors will ask me who the project manager is on a site and how that's going to work. So I tend to think about this: if the builder is somebody who's a tradesperson, really they're a site manager. What that means, they're like the site manager, the foreman. They're there every day. They're organising the people that need to come in. They're buying the materials that need to come in. They're pretty much organising everything that needs to be done on site each day. And that can work really well. So what they're doing, they're working on the day-to-day tactics of what needs to happen and the outcome that needs to be achieved that particular day. The project manager generally is somebody who's much more strategic level, which takes a step back and looks at an overall view. Now, on a small project or a single project, it may be that you're going to be the project manager, so you're looking at what needs to be done when. What they're more interested in, the project manager, is really what the design is going to be, the detail of that, the timelines of what's going to happen when, organising the budget, the payments. Those are sort of things your project manager is more concerned with, whereas the on-site manager, if you like, which quite often will be the builder themselves, what they're doing is doing the day-to-day operational running of that particular site. Now, for me, that works really well because that means that we don't necessarily have to have other people laid in between. Sometimes you have a small builder, then you've got another project manager as well, and then you're just building up and layering up costs, which I think are unnecessary. Now, if you've got several projects running, like we'll have a lot of different projects running at any one moment in time, then we do need somebody to oversee all those different sites to make sure that they're running properly. Otherwise, you'll be running around like a headless chicken trying to organize and manage all those projects. So in our business, for example, Idas, who works with me, he'll oversee a lot of the projects, making sure the builders are doing what they're doing. And in the past, we've had situations where we've had to sack builders partway through jobs because they haven't performed. If you haven't seen that video, we've got a video up here, which, unfortunately has happened more than once to us, where we've been working with somebody who hasn't really worked out, and we're no longer working with that particular builder, because that's just all part and parcel of this business. But what I'm doing is sharing with you my experience to minimize the chances of you falling into some of these mistakes or some of these traps. Hey, just a quick reminder, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button And that way YouTube can show this content to more people just like you. It massively helps me out. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you're getting more videos just like this. Remember, we are now have more than 200 videos like this on the channel. During this process of asking the builder to quote for the jobs, what we're doing is giving them our detailed specification that we have so they have a clearer understanding of what it is you want to be able to achieve. Because what we really want to do is be able to compare apples with apples. This is a mistake you see many people making. So for example, let's say if you've got a project, say go back to that 6-person HMO conversion, we ask 3 builders to quote it and they come in at 3 wildly different numbers because they've interpreted what you want and how much is required will be vary from each particular builder, so the prices will be very different as well. Now remember, at this stage what they're doing is just providing you an estimate if you're asking for a ballpark figure, unless you're giving them the detailed specification for them to be able to cost it up properly. Now it may be they may need to visit the site more than once to be able to look at that. They might need to take other people with them. It could be, for example, their structural engineer, their electrician might go with them to look at that project. Now give them the time to be able to really assess the property properly to be able to give you a proper quote. Now of course, these things depend on the size of the job as well. If it's a very small job, you expect these things to be relatively straightforward. But if it's a big project, let's say a big house renovation, we'll typically spend £120,000 on renovating a house or converting it to a HMO, for instance. Now in those projects, we need to make sure that the builder understands exactly what we want, the finish we want, so that specification is going to be key. So this way, when the quotes come back, we can look at them and compare. And if they're off slightly, then we can go back and have a chat with them about, how they've quoted certain things. But what I'm also looking for at this stage is a breakdown and not a single figure. I often get somebody call me and say, look, I've had a quote from a builder. They've said it's 60 grand. They've sent me a text. And what do you think? I think, well, you need a lot more information than that from them rather than just a ballpark number. You need to see a breakdown. This is where I was saying that some of the builders may not come back to you and quote it because they're really quite small. Some unfortunately are quite disorganized. They can't really manage the administration side of it and running around doing unpaid work such as quoting for jobs, which they may or may not get. Because let's face it, every job they quote isn't necessarily going to turn into a job for them. So this is like unpaid work that they're having to do. So some of these are not going to deliver on the quotes that you want. You'll end up with hopefully 3 quotes that you can compare because they've got a good breakdown on each particular one. One thing I like to do during this process of speaking to the builders and getting the quotes from them and discuss the specification with them is really understand what type of communication they like. Is their preference, for example, to text you, to WhatsApp you, to email you, to meet you face to face, to do everything on phone calls? They like to do video calls because let's face it, people are different and how they communicate will be different. And what I'm looking for is someone going to communicate in the way that I prefer. So for instance, if they say they want to send an email for everything, that's not necessarily my preferred method. I don't want to be sitting there writing long emails because that's not something I prefer to do. I'd rather just do a quick WhatsApp message or do a video call just to discuss where we are or to resolve any issues there that there might be there. And let's say something is much more thorough that we want to discuss in detail. Let's say we can jump on a Zoom meeting, you can record it and you've documented that conversation, for example. So it's understanding how your potential builder likes to communicate and whether that fits in with the way you prefer to communicate. And during this process, I'm also asking them, look, what's important for you in choosing the right customer? Because what I'm trying to do, remember what we started with, is try and pick a good builder, but I need to be a good customer as well. And asking them what's important. And often it's things like making sure they get paid on time or whatever the agreed time frames were. For example, they need the payments on Friday because they've got to pay their guys as well. And if they're not able to pay them, they're not going to show up to work on Monday. So it could be things as simple as that. But whatever it is, I don't want to assume. I want to ask questions to be able to understand, hey, tell me what's going to be really important for you in deciding what type of job you take on and what kind of things are important for you in making a decision on what kind of job to do. So for instance, it may also be that they don't necessarily want to do too many changes once you start a job. So you need to be clear up front. They don't like the idea of chopping and changing. And if they can see that you're clear in terms of what you want, then that's absolutely fine. It means that you're a bit scattergun at the beginning, like all over the place. Then that means that the chances of you constantly changing things are going to be very high and problematic for the builder as well. Now, this doesn't mean you can't make any changes, but of course, the more organized you are, the less likely you are to make changes because you'll have a more clearer idea of what it is that you're trying to achieve from the offset. The third and final step of the process is when you're instructing your builder to be able to do the job for you. This is really the contractual part where you're getting the paperwork sorted out with them in clear terms in terms of how it's going to work. Now, sometimes people get wrapped up in this in terms of what type of paperwork and contract they need to use. It doesn't need to be really complex. It's really important. It's something you understand. And I've seen people get involved in very lengthy contracts, and you think, well, actually, depending on the size of project, that may or may not be necessary. Sometimes it can be overkill. Sometimes it can be frighten the builder as well on a small job that really, they're getting wrapped up in all of this, which is too much for them as well. So he's trying to get a balance in terms of what's right. Now, I could just ask somebody to, put an extension up for me, and we can shake hands on it, and that's contractually a legal agreement as well. The challenge is if something goes wrong, enforcing that is going to be a problem. What was agreed, what the assumptions were, what was supposed to happen, how was it supposed to happen, what time frame, what did we agree, because nothing is documented. So it's important that you do document exactly what it is that you're asking the builder to do, getting them to give you clear quotes, having clear plans as well in terms of what it is that you want them to do. Now, this may be as simple as there's a number of emails that go backwards and forwards, which clarify exactly what it is that's going to be done, how much it's going to cost, how long it's going to take, what a typical start date or expected start date might be for the project, anything that might delay that, the price, whether it includes VAT. This is really important that you clarify whether there is or isn't VAT on the entire job, and so you've got a clear calculation of how that works. The other route is to use a JCT contract for minor works, which is more of a formal agreement, which is much more, people are much more aware in the building industry that these exist. But again, depending on the size of your project and the size of your builder in terms of whatever you think is going to be appropriate, remember what you're doing is having some kind of arrangement in place to try and protect you and protect the builder as well in case there's any issues. A little bit like an insurance policy and some clarity as well. So on the very basics, what you need to know who you are in terms of the customer, and that might be me as an individual, it might be one of our companies. So clarity of who the entity is that instructing the job, the customer that'll be paying for the job, that'll be receiving the works, who the builder is, all their full details rather than just a mobile number for them. So you've got their full details, if they're a limited company, their company number, etc. And you want to see the insurance documents as well, and then the quotation that they've provided you for the works. It might be tied in with the specification that you've given them. That's also part of this agreement. You might have some plans from the architects, you might have building regulation drawings. All of these things are going to form part of the agreement that you have. Now, it might be a set of loose documents like that, or it could be a single contract like a JCT contract that encompasses all that. Whichever method you choose to use, it's really what you think is appropriate in that particular situation and what you're comfortable with, and also on your experience as well, how experienced you are at doing these type of projects. Apart from the basics, there's a few other things that you need to think about in terms of the agreement and what needs to go in there. One of the most important ones is going to be payments. It's going to be important for you, it's going to be important for the builder as well, because that's ultimately your way of trying to control what's happening, and the builder ultimately, that's why they're doing the job, because they want to get paid. In terms of how you specify that's going to work. So for instance, it may be a case of you're going to make them a certain payment once the first fix is done, i.e. the electric cables have been put in and the pipe work's been put in. It might be you make another payment once all the skimming and the plastering work's been done. It may be you make another payment once the actual kitchen unit's finished and done as well. So you can quantify the individual items in terms of certain payments are going to be made at certain stages when certain bits of work is complete. Or alternatively, what you could do is you can make payments on a weekly basis. Let's say it's a 10-week project, you break it down to 10 equal payments. Now, my suggestion is not to do it the latter way, i.e. don't break it down to 10 equal payments, because the amount of work that's done, the value of that work isn't necessarily going to be the same every week. There'll be some weeks where there's significantly more expenditures occurred, and there'll be other weeks with very little. So for instance, when they're stripping out the property, actually the cost of that is very little in terms of the strip out up front. So when they're fitting the kitchen, that could be quite a substantial expenditure. So when you divide it up into equal payments, it doesn't necessarily work out very well. So my suggestion is always trying to get the builder to quantify for you when those payments are going to happen based on the work that they've done to that point. The next thing that you want to clarify is a CDM. CDM is the construction design management, which deals with the aspects of health and safety on site. Now, ideally, you want your building contractor to take on that responsibility, what they call the principal contractor, so they have the responsibility for health and safety on site. Now, in the 2015 regulations, it made it much more clearer in terms of who's responsible for what, so it's important that these things are discussed and clarified. Now, if you're going to be using, say, individual tradespeople to manage a project and you're going to be managing the project, then my suggestion is, if you're not familiar with the CDM, is to get a health and safety consultant in that can help you set this up so you ensure that you're covered off and protecting yourself properly and the workers on site. Penalties is something that comes up quite a lot when we talk about instructing a builder. People talk about, oh, we put a penalty in place if they don't finish in 12 weeks. As soon as it goes into week 13, I'm going to knock 20% off their bill. Well, in all fairness, you can't actually do that, because if you do have some kind of penalty in place, then really what you need to do is have that tied in with some kind of measurable damages that might be caused. So for example, it might be that you're running on a bridging loan and your costs now increasing because you've gone past a certain point. It means that you're going to rent the property at a certain point. You can't do that because the job is not finished. So you've got measurable, quantifiable amounts that you might be able to claim for and say, look, if this doesn't happen by this time, I need to be able to recover these costs. But you need to be clear about that up front before you start the job, rather than just having some kind of penalty and then thinking at the end that you're going to make some deductions. On more bigger projects, they have things like retentions. What a retention does is each time you make a payment, you might keep, say, 5% aside. Let's say you're paying £10,000 for a payment that month, you might keep 5% of that side. That sits separately as a retention that's paid once the job is finished. The other thing you might have as well on a bigger project is what we call liquidated damages. Liquidated damages, again, is more quantifiable damages that or losses you might incur, so you recover that as damages from the builder. But I'm guessing on the projects that we tend to do, is kind of more small and medium-sized ones, you're not going to necessarily have to worry about that at this stage. And finally, be mindful of extras. These are extra little things that you remember along the way that you want to add, you want to change, you want to move this from here to here. You've decided now to have that door to swing that way. You've decided you don't want to put that there now, it needs to go over here. All these things will slow your job down and also cost more money. So the more time you can spend in planning out exactly what you want from the offset, it will minimize the number of additions or changes you need to do on that particular project. So when you are making these changes, you have to remember that now the timeline might fall out because it's taking longer to get certain things done, because you're changing things, either having to redo things or having to do extra jobs. And if they're having to redo things, then essentially you're paying for things twice. But if you're moving something within a project, it's important that's documented clearly as well, and the process of how that's going to work. So if you're asking them to make some kind of change, let's say, for example, you're going to have a kitchen unit, that's going to be 10 units here, and now you've decided you want to move it to this side, it's only going to be 8 units. So effectively, you've got to first of all build in the cost of the deletion, and what we mean by that is now it's actually not going to cost as much, because you're only buying 8 units as opposed to 10 units for that particular job, and then the cost of having to maybe replumb it and move it to another side. So there's two parts of the cost. One is sometimes to delete something that's now no longer being done, and then the cost of doing something additional as a change as well. And often we have to bear in mind that changes that we make throughout the project are probably going to cost us more, an opportunity for builder to really charge whatever they think is fair or reasonable for them, because we don't really have an alternative to be able to switch to at that time. We've just got to go with it. So hence you want to minimize the amount of changes you're making on a project. For watching all the way to the end, I want to give you a bonus as a thank you, and that's I want to share with you how you can shave off quite a significant amount potentially off your project, and that's by understanding VAT. Now, assuming your builder is VAT registered, what you're able to do in certain cases is reduce the amount of VAT that they will charge you. Now, you can't recover that VAT as an ordinary individual because you're not operating as a VAT registered business, so you're going to have to pay whatever the VAT is. However, if you can get that reduced to either 5% or 0, that means you're saving anything from 15 to 20% on a project, and that being quite significant. So for example, on a 100 grand project, that could be £15,000 potentially that you're saving, so it can be quite significant. There's two key things to look for. One is if a property's been empty for quite some period of time, or if you're converting it to increase the number of units. So it needs to be empty for at least 2 years, the property, i.e. wasn't used for 2 years, or you're increasing the number of units. For example, you're turning a family house into a 6-person HMO, so the units, i.e. the number of people that be living in it was now increased, or you're doing a property from a house to a flat conversion. In those instances, you can get the VAT reduced down to 5%. And it needs to be 5% on the works that's actually done to do that, to do the work, and it doesn't apply to things like the fittings, like the carpets, for example, or any consultant surveys, reports you need to have done. It's really just for the work itself, but can be quite a significant saving. The other way to get the VAT down to 0, this only applies if you're building brand new standalone property. So if you're building, say, new build houses or new build apartments, in that example, you can get the VAT down to 0. Unfortunately, in the property investing world, we hear too many stories about projects going wrong, builders walking off site, not delivering what was expected of them, it running on for way longer. In fact, I'm talking to somebody now whose project was literally supposed to be about 3 months, and it's been running for 3 years. Clearly the builder's taken them for a ride in that situation. But these stories we hear all the time. And the reason we hear these is because they simply don't plan well enough in the first place and hire the right people. So hopefully the key learning from this video is by hiring the right people, it means you'll massively increase the chances of having a successful project. Now what we've got lined up next for you over here, YouTube tells me that you're really going to enjoy this video, but just before you go over to watch that, make sure you click on my face just down here to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I look forward to seeing you on this video just up here.